Welcome to the next generation, folks. This game looks absolutely breathtaking. From trillions of particle effects to wonderful lighting, animations, and spectacular environments, Killzone Shadowfall truly shows the early processing power of the PlayStation 4. What games are going to look like in a year from now is truly beyond me. I was absolutely floored by some of the environments here. One minute you're in space, the next you're in a lush and beautiful mountainside. I don't know guys, but I just found it spectacularly well done, and it brings the series' already impressive technical presentation to an entirely new level. For years this series has relied on grays and browns, but with Shadowfall we have color. Graphics aren't the only thing that make Killzone fun to play, the story is also really unique. Although I gotta admit, it is kind of cliche. It's cool because this time you see both sides of the Vectin versus Helghast war. Typically, we're always, saying that the Helgen are just like horrible monsters and whatever, but this time you actually sort of feel for them, and it's really interesting. And because you play both sides of the war, as it were, you just come to better understand the real situation, and as such, I think this is actually my favorite story in the series so far. There's also a nice amount of mission variety. You have to disarm bombs on futuristic trains, break into a spacecraft floating somewhere in space, or you just might be in the wrong place at the wrong time and have to prevent further damage from an ongoing terrorist attack. Whatever it is you're doing, every individual element is really fun to play. The weapons are also really fun. All your typical FPS weapons are featured here, from handguns to shotguns and pretty much everything in between. Sure, you've got access to a couple of futuristic weapons, but nothing too over the top. I should also mention that some of the weapons do indeed have secondary functions, so be on the lookout for that as well. Grenades, C4, and other explosives feel much more powerful than they did in their PS3 counterparts, which was a welcome surprise. Owl, your companion of sorts, proves to be extremely useful in this game. You use the trackpad on the DualShock 4 in order to command him to put up a shield, hack or disrupt a computer or turret, attack all enemies, or create a zip line for you to rappel off of, and I found it worked absolutely perfectly. I didn't have any issues whatsoever. You can emit a sonar scan of sorts, which pulsates a light beam all around you, and this goes to the walls, and the objective is to pinpoint where enemies are in the environment, because the graphics are so spectacular that sometimes it can be a little hard to see where enemies are coming from and where gunfire is coming from. But I also found that this is very useful in order to determine where you have to go next, and we'll get on that in just a bit. Most chapters feature one giant map, which allows you to use non-linear attack patterns, and this is a first for the series, as you can decide to take out enemies from the ground level, from above, or try and get around them and take them out silently one at a time. Unfortunately, not every chapter allows you to do this though, but when they do, it's super fun. And speaking of great fun, the best mode is the online multiplayer modes. They're absolutely great. Warzone randomizes classic multiplayer matches like Deathmatch, Capture and Hold, and more. You've got 10 maps to choose from, with some standouts including Penthouse and the Remains. There are 3 classes, Scout, Assault, and Support, each with their own unique abilities. By far the coolest aspect of the multiplayer mode is just the sheer amount of options you can customize within the Warzone. You can limit weapons, classes, and typical stuff like that, but it goes a step further and allows you to change the location of capture beacons, alter your hold times, and pretty much anything else you can imagine. I also like the fact that bots are present to fill up maps or use as you see fit. And while I mentioned at the onset of the review that the graphics really did steal the show, the audio is also very impressive. Not only do you have really nice sounding special effects, but they do something really interesting with the DualShock 4's internal microphone. audio logs that you find throughout the environment will play out exclusively through the controller. And it's interesting because I found it really sucked me into the experience far deeper because of the fact that you have, you know, all this ambient sound going around through your surround sound, and then you hear sort of like farther from your face the audio logs. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I thought that was really, really unique. The soundtrack is also excellent. It has tracks that sound like they were from the Vangelis. You Blade Runner fans will know who I'm referring to. And then there's much more like, you know, in-your-face heavy music. But all around, the soundtrack doesn't get in the way. It rather enhances your immersion, and that's absolutely perfect. Now, of course, there's some nitpicking and some bad stuff, as there always are, or rather always is, with things like this. Number one is a pet peeve of mine that's been around for a while now with the Killzone series, and that is that there's no online co-op. I understand that this is a story-driven FPS, but damn it, I like playing these games with my friends, and not having an online co-op really sucks. I wouldn't really care if it was just a clone of myself. You don't need to, you know, have it explained in the story. I really don't care. Anyways, that's not the big issue. The big issue is the fact that the pacing is completely off. 1 minute you're taking on what feels like an entire armada, and the next you don't see a single enemy for ages. The zero-G missions can also feel very tedious because, I don't know, I just find they were going on for a little too long. There's also a free fall section that will have you ripping your hair out. It's so damn frustrating. And I get that the developer really wanted to spice things up with variety, but in the end I found the game just suffers like because of the pacing, and it overall just feels very unbalanced. But pacing was only one part of the story though. The other is basically the lack of fights. Where the hell are all the fights? There's a couple of really impressive large-scale fights, but for the most part, you're left just picking off one enemy at a time, and that's not all that exciting. But the absolute worst aspect of Shadowfall has to be the lack of a true map system, or what I prefer to call intelligent nav points. The vast majority of the time when you hit up on the D-pad, the nav point only shows where your destination is. But in a giant open area, it doesn't tell you where you should be heading in order to get to that location. Now, I'm not a fan of hand-holding, but I did find that this was just a little bit too loose. And oftentimes I found myself getting lost and didn't know, you know, where the hell I was supposed to go. So to wrap everything up, this is a very impressive showpiece for the PlayStation 4, but I think there's a few fundamental flaws that prevent the game from really reaching greatness, as it were. For the full written review, hit up projectcoe.com.
Do